My wife and I had been dreaming of a quaint, secluded home for years. When we found the old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, it felt like fate. The price was unbelievably low, and the house, despite its age, was in good condition. We had moved in during the late autumn, the trees bare and the sky perpetual gray. From the very first night, the house felt off. There was an unsettling stillness, as if the very air held its breath, but we chalked it up to be the nerves and exhaustion from the move. It was on our second night that we heard it. A faint, scratching noise coming from the attic. Our bedroom was on the second floor, and the attic was directly above us. At first, I dismissed it as just maybe a squirrel or something small, but the second was persistent, and it seemed to be deliberate, almost rhythmic. "Did you hear that?" my wife, Sarah, asked, her voice a whisper in the dark. "Probably just a raccoon, babe," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'll check it out tomorrow." The next day, armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, I pulled down the creaky attic ladder and climbed up. The attic was dusty and filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. There were boxes labeled with dates that went back decades, maybe even a century. I walked carefully. The floorboards groaned under my weight. I saw nothing unusual, no sign of any animals. But as I went to leave, the flashlight beam caught something odd. In the far corner of the attic, there was a small door, almost like a hatch. It was so low that you couldn't even crawl. Curious, I approached it. The door was old and wooden, with a rusty handle. I hesitated, feeling an inexplicable dread. Taking a deep breath, I tugged on the handle. The door opened with a creak that echoed in the silence. Behind it was a small, dark crawl space. I shone the flashlight inside and saw what looked like to be a bundle of old clothes. Just as I was about to leave, something caught my eye. Among the clothes, there was a small, intricately carved box. I reached in and pulled it out. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and the carvings were beautiful but eerie, depicting strange, contorted faces. I brought the box downstairs, and Sarah and I examined it together. Inside, we found a collection of old photographs, a child's diary, and a tarnished locket. The photographs were black and white, showing a stern-looking family in front of what appeared to be our house. The diary belonged to a girl named Eliza, and as we read through it, a chilling story began to unfold. Eliza wrote about her family, but most notably, she wrote about her brother, Thomas. Thomas, according to the diary, had always been a very peculiar kid. As he grew older, his behavior became more erratic and disturbing. He claimed to hear voices and see things that no one else could see. The family tried to keep it a secret, fearing the stigma of mental illness, especially in those times. The entries grew darker and more frantic. Eliza wrote more strange rituals Thomas would perform in the attic, about how he would sit in the corner, talking to someone only he could see. He mentioned the small door and the crawl space, and how Thomas would disappear there for hours. The final entry was most unsettling. Eliza wrote about the night when the voices told Thomas to free them. She described waking up to the sound of what sounded like scratching and found Thomas in the attic, standing in front of the small door. He turned to her, his eyes wide in terror and ecstasy, and said, "They're coming for us." After that entry, the diary abruptly ended. As we finished reading, the temperature of the room seemed to drop. We both felt it, a cold, oppressive presence. That night, the scratching in the attic returned, louder and more insistent. It was as if something was trying to break free. Sarah and I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, Every gust of wind set our nerves on edge. Around midnight, we heard it again. The unmistakable sound of footsteps in the attic. This time, they were heavy. This time, they were heavy, deliberate, moving with a purpose. "I can't take this anymore," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to get out of here." But we didn't have anywhere to go. At least not immediately. So we decided to confront whatever it was. We grabbed flashlights and cautiously made our way to the attic. The air was freezing, and our breaths formed visible clouds. As we climbed the ladder, the footsteps stopped. The silence was even more terrifying. We reached the attic and shone our flashlights around, the beams cutting through the darkness. Everything was as I left it, except the small door. It was open. I approached it, my heart pounding. Inside the crawlspace was empty now. The bundle of clothes in the box were gone. But there was something else. A faint, almost imperceptible whispering, like a distant conversation just beyond the range of hearing. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut behind us. We were plunged into darkness, and the only light coming from our flashlights. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until a cacophony of voices. I felt a hand grip my arm. It was Sarah. "Let's get out of here, please," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. We scrambled down the ladder and out of the attic, slamming the hatch shut behind us. We didn't stop until we were outside, standing in the cold air of the night. The house loomed above us, its windows dark and foreboding. The next morning, we packed up our things and left. We stayed with a friend while we looked for a new place. We never went back to that house, and we never spoke about what happened again. A few months later, I received a call from the real estate agent handling the sale of our house. He told me that there was new owners that had found something in the attic. A small, intricately carved box. It was empty. The night as I tried to sleep, I heard it again. The faint sound of scratching, coming from the walls. I had always thought that Japan would be one of the best adventures of a lifetime. The allure of the new culture and different foods and an entirely different way of living was too much to just resist. My job as an English teacher in a small town just outside of Tokyo was perfect, giving me the chance to experience Japan in a way that most tourists never could. One of the first places that I discovered was a little convenience store down the street from my apartment. It wasn't a flashy 7-Eleven or a Lawson's or anything, but a small, family-run place that had a quaint charm about it. The sign above the door read, "Kobayashi Mart," in fading red letters. Every morning I'd stop by for a coffee and a rice ball before heading to work. The first few months were blissful. I quickly fell into a routine and started recognizing the employees at the Kobayashi Mart. There was Yuki, the shy girl who always smiled and bowed deeply whenever I entered. Then there was Kenji, a friendly college student who enjoyed practicing his English with me. But then something strange happened. Yuki disappeared. I asked Kenji about her, and he shrugged, saying she had probably gone back to her hometown. New faces placed her behind the counter, but they never lasted long. At first I didn't think much of it. High turnover in a normal convenience store, right? One evening after a particular grueling day at work, I went to Kobayashi Mart for some comfort food. A young man I'd never seen before was at the register. He looked terrified, glancing nervously at a trapdoor behind the counter that I had never noticed before. It struck me as odd, but I just brushed it off as the jitters of the new job. I continued my nightly visits, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every few weeks, a new face appeared, looking more frightened than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One rainy night, curiosity got the better of me. The store was empty, except for the new girl at the register, who looked as if she might burst into tears at any moment. I pretended to just browse the shelves, keeping an eye on her. After a few minutes, she opened a trapdoor and descended the stairs, leaving the store unattended. Heart pounding, I crept behind the counter and peered down the dark stairwell. A faint foul odor wafted up, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Ignoring every instinct to turn back, I carefully made my way down those steps, my footsteps muffled by the sounds of the rain outside. The basement was dimly lit, and I could hear the girl sobbing quietly. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw her standing before a massive iron door, her back to me. The door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space beyond. She stepped inside, and I followed, staying as silent as possible. What I saw next will haunt me forever. In the center of the room was a grotesque creature, its enormous, bloated body covered in glistened scales. Rows of sharp teeth lined a gaping jaw, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. The girl stood frozen, paralyzed with fear. Before I could react, the creature lunged forward, and the girl screamed and was cut short. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in a ragged gasp. I turned and fled up the stairs, my mind racing with terror. I didn't stop until I was safely back into my apartment, locking the door behind me. My hands trembled as I tried to process what I'd just witnessed. The Kobayashi Mart was a front, a facade hiding something monstrous beneath the surface. The next day, I called in sick to work, my mind consumed by the horror of the previous night. I had to do something, but what? Who would believe me? The police? The locals? Everyone seemed oblivious to the sinister truth lurking beneath their feet. Days turned into weeks, and the nightmares plagued my sleep. I avoided the Kobayashi Mart, opting for a longer walk to the nearest 7-Eleven instead. But the guilt gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to do something to stop this. Finally, I mustered up the courage to return. The store looked same as ever, but I knew better. Another new employee greeted me, her eyes wide with fear. I needed proof, something to show the authorities. As I browsed the shelves, I discreetly took out my phone and began recording. The trap door opened, and she descended down the stairs. I followed, keeping a safe distance. This time, I was ready. I captured every detail. The iron door, the cavernous room, the monstrous creature. I fled once more, but this time, I had evidence. I took it to the police, my heart pounding with the mix of fear and hope. They were skeptical at first, but the video spoke for itself. A raid was organized at the Kobayashi Mart, and it was then shut down. The creature was captured, its existence hidden from the public to prevent massive hysteria. The town moved on, unaware of how close they had come to a living nightmare. As for me, I couldn't stay. The memories were too painful. The fear, too real. I returned to the US, but the horrors of that small Japanese town will stay with me forever. I still see their faces in my dreams. The terrified employees, the monstrous creature. Japan was supposed to be an adventure, but it became a waking nightmare I will never forget. Thanks for watching, I really hope you enjoyed it. If you do and you want to hear more creepypastas or stuff like this, please like, comment, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. I've got a lot more and a lot more coming. I've got some wild stories that are already scheduled to be coming out for the next week or two, maybe. But yeah, make sure to check out the links in the description as well, like Twitter, Instagram, everything like that is in there as well, including my Gmail if you would like to submit a story. Maybe you are an author or like to write creepy stories or creepypastas, stuff like that. If you do and you would like to hear your stuff read, make sure to check out the Gmail. But with that being said, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one.